Welcome to the SPS Digital Learning Hour.
Brought to you by the Digital Learning and Assessment Department.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm your host, Mike Thomas.
And I'm Suzanne Zargis.
We're bringing you the latest news in Springfield Public Schools in regards to technology, along with inspiring interviews from teachers who are using technology in the classroom.
We'll also inform you of the latest updates, practices, and news as it pertains to our district. Whether you are new to using technology in the classroom or are a seasoned vet, we are here to help.
Coming up next, in case you missed it. For this week's In Case You Missed It, the blog post is up, and it's the final blog post of the year, just like this is the final podcast of the year. For this week's blog post, we actually talk about Daylight, Brightspace's newest looking platform. So essentially what this means to you and me is that Brightspace is cleaner, it's more responsive, and it's just easier to look at. It's two-tone white. We've changed a few terms around. News is now announcements. Quizzes are still quizzes. Dropbox is no longer called Dropbox, it's called assignments. Overall, it shouldn't be that much of a big change. Other than a few ways it looks. Check out over the summer. There'll be more changes coming through. We like it. It looks a lot more K-12 student friendly. You should enjoy it too.
That's it for In Case You Missed It. Coming up next, Hot Takes.
Alright, so for this week's Hot Take, Suzanne, I found an article that's not necessarily technology-based, but it still fits into the whole game-based learning and talking about the difference between a board game and a digital game. So this article is called Books to Games, Transforming Classic Novels into Role-Playing Adventures. And let me tell you, in high school, when I read Fahrenheit 451, I probably would have understood it better if this person was my teacher. I don't know about you.
I didn't have to read Fahrenheit 451, so now I need to go read it.
So essentially what this article is talking about, this one teacher that talks about how they took the book Fahrenheit 451. For those of you who have not read it, it is a very popular book in education circles and in education districts all across the United States. Countless classrooms have read the classic 1953 tale of free speech, government censorship, and critical thinking. And of course, when giving these, teachers assign traditional work. So there's the book reports, there's the discussion questions. If some teachers are even so forethought, they have different fill-in-the-blank worksheets or crossword puzzles or all sorts of different things. I know for me, my teacher, it was crossword puzzles where we had to go and find the quote from the story from that particular chapter. Super annoying, super boring. Didn't really help me remember any of the book. What they're talking about here is this one teacher who took this book, in particular is what they're talking about, but has done it with many other books, and turned it into a board game. Now, I love board games. I have Paramedic at home. I have Settlers of Catan, Battleship.
I know Battleship. I didn't know the other two.
We play Life all the time. Yahtzee, card games, Monopoly. Oh, I love Monopoly. I can't believe they changed the pieces. It's so terrible.
We can't get off on that tangent.
Total side tangent. Dinosaurs should not be in Monopoly. That's all I have to say.
I agree.
Well, anyways, so what they did is they broke up the elements within the book into game components. So depicting various scenes from the book. For example, Guy Montag's house, the fire station, the old woman's house. Characters within the book. So Montag, Clarice McClellan, Mildred Montag, Faber, and the rest. And then things in which they interact with. So books, television, fire, medication. And then the teacher introduced new situations and characters. So things that were not actually in the book, which kind of help fuel the creative writing, creative thinking, problem solving of how does the character fit into the story. And so doing something like this requires the students to have an intimate knowledge of the source material, the time it was written, which I thought was great because not only are you getting the creative writing aspect, which let's face it, creative writing is always the fun writing topics, but they're getting a lot of research in practice. They're getting a lot of practice of research and other ways that it helps develop your understanding of a particular time period.
Yeah, I loved this article, Mike. I was not familiar with role-playing games, or RPG, as I now understand it's referred to. But there was one phrase in here that jumped out at me, in that the story's elements are liberated from the linear text. And I thought, how cool is that? Because there are so many students that, for different reasons, just cannot get involved and engaged in reading a classic novel in a classroom setting. So to step away from that linear text, they still need the deeper understanding to do this type of, I don't want to call it an activity, but an activity.
A series of activities called a game.
Yes. And it makes it so much more concrete to them. I think it's very difficult for a lot of students to really understand what's going on in a complicated novel. But once they do everything that they need to prepare for this, and then they're interacting with their peers, I think it helps in their overall understanding of the book.
Yeah, I can think back to books that were required reading in high school, where I'm like, I really didn't understand it as well. And so like something like this would have helped me out quite a bit, because the article does talk about D&D, which for those of you who don't know is Dungeons and Dragons. And I have pictures of me when I was 8 years old playing it at the dinner table till 3 a.m, because that's what we do. That's what us nerds and geeks do. Yes, I did say it. I am one. I am going to see Wonder Woman this week. I can't believe it's taken me 2 weeks to actually go and see it, but I will go. I'm going and seeing it because I'm super excited about it. So just the idea of like how games can be worked into the classroom, it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of planning and effort. It's not like you flip open a board game, here it is. Like you actually have to build it. And the article has some pretty crazy creative pictures, which don't make any sense until you start reading the article and seeing how they're applied. Also, neat little fact about D&D, or Dungeons and Dragons, is that there are some famous people who still play it. There's a particular late night host, Stephen Colbert, and our favorite Groot, Vin Diesel, is also an avid player of D&D. And what's really great about it is I remember when I played it and then watching Stranger Things and they were playing it, is that it's a storytelling game. Like you have to have, like, whoever is in charge of the game has to really know what's going on, know the entire world, and then they're telling a story. And then of course, like, you got the game part where you're rolling the dice and, oh, this is happening. But at the heart of the game is storytelling, which is so awesome.
Very awesome. And one thought I had when I was visualizing what this might be like in the classroom and thinking about how I would be able to, or not, play one of these games, is that it forces students who are typically very comfortable with the memorization and the standard way of reading a novel. It forces them to break out of that box and to think creatively and think differently, which may not be comfortable for them, but which I think is completely necessary in today's world of technology, where nothing is ever going to stay the same, ever. They have to get comfortable with changing and thinking differently and being creative. And one question I had, Mike, was, are these games played primarily at a high school level, or is it all through K-12? Because I did notice later on in the article, the origin of these was really at the college level. So I love that, because it to me, that just says we have high expectations for students, at least at the high school level, and that we're expecting them to now do something that used to be college level. But is this something that's done at all grade levels?
So I think it's something that can be done. Again, it goes back to planning, prepping, and students taking ownership of it. I think back to when I was in 6th grade. It took me a moment there, because in Vermont, we had K-6 schools, not K-5. And so it was going to throw me. I was going to say 5th grade, but it was really 6th grade.
There are some K-6 schools in Massachusetts, too.
Okay. I'm just used to hearing the K-5s. So in 6th grade, we actually didn't necessarily have a book that we were reading and playing the game along, but we were doing role-playing games. We did this for learning our Greek and Roman history. I remember, I might have told this story before, but I was on Team Sparta, and we each had our own city-states that we were a part of. And then we role-played. We had to read about, we had to learn about, we had to understand what kind of place we were living, our character, our name. We got to make up our names. I don't remember my name, but I remember one of the other kids in the name group, he took the name Dorcas, because that was a traditional Greek and Roman name. And so we laughed a lot, because we're like, we can call you Dorcas. Anyways, so it was still doing a role-playing game. It wasn't to the extent that they're talking about here, which is taking the book and breaking it down that way. But as a teacher, especially in project-based classrooms, this is something that you could definitely do. Because what I did like is they talked about how, at first it made me think back to 6th grade when we were doing this part, like the Greek and Roman history. But I'm like, oh, today we've got Common Core. We got to stick with the standards. And I love the fact that the author points out, like, everything was Common Core based that they did. It just didn't look like what everybody is used to. So to answer your question, it is possible. It just takes some planning.
Right. I think it would be great if every grade did do this, because then in the lower grades, they could have much shorter assignments, much shorter books, and a much shorter process of doing all the research to be able to do the game-based learning. Is that right? Role-playing games. You got me hooked on game-based learning now. So.
It is. That's what this is, though. This is game-based learning. It's just a different kind of game. It's not a computer game. It's a board game.
In the younger grades for the more involved games that they'll have at the high school level. It also pulls in everything we already know about kinesthetic learners and the fact that students remember more if they're actually doing something instead of just being told some information. So it all comes together for me. I love it.
Yeah, I like the article. The author pointed out the teacher had the students writing 2,700 words per week in their writing time. That's a lot. That's 4 or 5 typed pages, give or take, depending on the size of font and whatnot. But what they really liked is that the students had to figure out how everything interacted, how their character interacted with the setting, how the character interacted with other characters. They had to put a lot of thought into that. And again, that comes back to the preparation, the research that they had to do, the historical period of the novel, making arguments about what a character would do and conveying details about the character in writing. When I think of like the NaNoWriMo, one of the things that they have you do in that October time, if you're following the lesson plans, is you really develop a character to the point where, would the character order a pizza? Or would they be more apt to go to a French restaurant? Like, even though that seems kind of silly on the outside, it really builds up the character in the writer's mind so that they can clearly and articulately, I think I said that right, write that character well. Instead of being like, Johnny went to the store and bought food for dinner. Johnny then went home and made the food for dinner. Like, there's a level of storytelling that comes through in something like this because you have such an understanding. Well, for Fahrenheit 451 takes place around, Cold War time? I'm trying to remember, but I'm also looking at the article here because I think they do mention it too. The Cold War is very prevalent in Fahrenheit 451, and so the teacher had them do research on what it was like to be in the Cold War. Now, we know that the restaurants, I'm going to go back to the food reference because we just ate lunch. The restaurants back then were a lot different than they are now. Like, if you were going to order pizza, there were very few options. Most of the time, most food was made at home. In the Cold War, microwaves were just starting to be introduced. So a lot of food was handmade every day, not something you could just pop in a microwave. And then they also, like the pre-made dinners that you put in the oven, those were in their infancy during that time. And so that was changing, like the little TV stands, like all these things that come together to help you understand these characters better.
Right. And I like the fact that because of all of that, all the research that students are required to do to play this game well, it eliminates the possibility that a group of kids are going to come together to play this game and just make up crazy stories off the top of their head. Someone in that group is going to have done their research and know each and every character and say, no, you can't do that. That character wouldn't do that because, and then even if that's the situation, that student's going to learn from this conversation more about that character than they obviously didn't get from reading the book.
Yeah. And so sticking with the Fahrenheit 451, the author talked about one of the students' characters that they built. And I just want to read you kind of what they wrote because I think it'll help gain this understanding that we're talking about here. So he has a pick The character's name is Lucifer Igneal. Quite a name. It says he has a pick and hob helmet and wears a long black leather coat with the bottoms of it tattered and burned itself. The coat has an insignia of a Chinese dragon surrounded by flames, which is why Montag has a salamander on his arm, and then in quotes, Bradbury 4. So Bradbury chapter 4, or page 4, I'm not sure which. I haven't read the book in a while. Showing that he is the underleveled Igneal as well as his dark stature and evil spirit. Ironically, he speaks in biblical terms, which is where Captain Beatty obtains his choice of words and phrases from, such as, you've been locked up here for years with a regular something Tower of Babel. I'm not going to curse on here, but it says it there. That's from Bradbury, page 35. I'm guessing page 35. No one knows where he disappeared, but the crimes roaming around are told to be his doings. So they created a character and placed it into the story and showed how the character connected to characters already in the story, which is a crazy amount of detail and a crazy amount of work that these students have to go through to do this, which is awesome.
It is very impressive.
And then probably my favorite part, which made me jump up and down, because I think what's one of the biggest concerns with schools?
Students not engaged in their learning.
Okay, what is the second biggest concern?
Because that's what my point is coming up. I thought you were going to take it.
No.
Blurt it out.
The big M word.
Mastery.
Money.
Money.
Because it costs money for games. Digital games, it costs money for. Something like this, it can be made with little to no money. Why? Because the students can build the game boards. The students build the characters. The students do the creating. And it doesn't take a computer to do that.
Exactly. So not only do they save on money, but leading into the point that I just blurted out, it engages so many students that typically wouldn't have been interested in that class. And that's always just the jackpot right there. If you can engage students that typically are not engaged, then you win.
As they say in here, dramatically changing the instruction style from what is typical, which is when we think about book reports and reading books in high school, read a book, write a paper, read a book, write a paper, read a book, write a paper. By taking that aspect out, it does engage all those students who otherwise wouldn't. And it would even get those non-readers engaged, because no one wants to be in the classroom and be the only person who doesn't understand what's going on. If the class has more people who don't understand what's going on, it's easier to hide. It's easier to tune out and check out. But if everybody else is in on it, then that's like positive peer pressure of getting that student to also be engaged, which is great.
The other thing I loved about this article, Mike, was how it helps students with their interpersonal relationships and also the interpretation of rules, the development of creative endeavors, and they find ways to apply what they learned while playing these games to real life. So there was one student who played these role-playing games in school, and then she got a job, I believe it was at Old Navy, and she found herself elevated to a managerial role when her manager was absent. And at first, she was a nervous wreck because she was a shy student and very hesitant at first. But then she thought of this game and how she had to put herself into the role of one of the characters. And she used that same thought process to put herself into a manager role and went through all the same steps, and she did a fine job.
Yeah, and again, I mean, we can't ask for much more when a student leaves, whether they go to college or whether they start a career, that the skills that they leave school with are skills that they can apply in the real world. And through this kind of board game RPG, Dungeons and Dragons, role-playing game, it helped the former students realize her potential and give her the strength to persevere when it was tough. These are a lot of the soft skills, the things that we can't sit there and be like, this student knows how to do this well. Check. This student is able to adapt to any environment. Check. Like, we don't grade those things. Those are the soft skills.
Right. That's the challenge, right? I mean, we want our students to be able to do so much. And the piece of how do we assess those skills is still what we're working on. What I found interesting, although I pretty much assumed this, is the fact that it's still relatively rare to see role-playing games in the classroom. But I like the phrase that they used, in part because of perceived social stigma. That jumped out at me. That's not how people think of school. they think of kids sitting at a desk, reading a book, writing a book report. So it's that whole radical shift again that we have to get used to let our kids learn.
Yeah. As times are changing, students are learning differently than they were when we were in school. They're learning differently than when our parents were in school, and so on and so forth. We are really adapting to the times.
Making me feel old again, but in a good way, right? Got to keep changing, got to keep moving towards the future.
And so before we wrap this up, I know we spent a lot of time on Fahrenheit 451, which is always a very controversial book. Some other books that have been used, at least this article has talked about, books from J.R.R. Tolkien, which if you're not familiar with, that's The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. George R.R. Martin's A Song of Fire and Ice. So if you're an HBO fan, you know your Game of Thrones. So that was also used. But I think the point is, it just takes... another one was from Oscar Wilde, The Importance of Being Earnest. But it just takes planning. The use of tabletop RPG games in the classroom, while it is rare, but teachers that invest time and energy into turning traditional activities into games are seeing rewarding results. We've seen that when we visited rooms that are doing some game-based learning, and it's just going to continue to help your students grow and grow and grow so that they will be successful adults in whatever field that they choose.
My hot take this week comes from Edutopia, and it is about assistive technology. The title of my article is Assistive Technology Can Benefit All Students, and it lists 5 tools for reading, writing, and time management that can help all students, not just those with learning disabilities. I loved just the title of this. I knew I was going to read it. I knew I was going to love it. I immediately thought back to when I was getting my master's, and one of the courses I took, the professor said exactly that she was going to give us multiple strategies for students with learning disabilities and just very individual special circumstances. But she prefaced it all with the fact that everything we were going to learn were strategies that could be helpful to every student in the classroom, and that in her experience, every teacher who used them was amazed at how helpful they were to everyone in the classroom, not just those with special needs.
Yeah, I mean, the tools that they talk about, they're great alternatives to doing traditional things. Like the first one, text-to-speech, for students who have a hard time reading, it's a great tool. For students who struggle with tier 3 words, it's a great tool. It's a great tool for any student reading on any device, and it's something you can't get from a book.
Right. And I think I'm guessing that there are people out there who are resistant to using some of these assistive technology devices, because in the back of their mind, they're thinking, well, but the student needs to learn to read. The student needs to learn to decode those words without hearing it from somebody else. But
right. Oh, sorry.
But in my mind, text-to-speech is really no different than when you're reading with your parent at home. You're hearing the words, you're looking at the words, and that all in all helps you learn how to read.
That's exactly the point I was just going to make too. That text-to-speech is no different than read aloud. It's very specific read aloud for a very specific person. And most text-to-speech, I know this talks, my only gripe with this article is that it focuses on Apple products.
I noticed that. I knew you were going to have a gripe
because
with that.
we don't have Apple products.
But it does give
But
options.
It does give a few options. But for the most part, most text-to-speech tools, they light up the words as you read along. As they're saying them, the words write up. Whether they're using Core Clicks, which is something many schools in the district have, or if you're using, what's the other? There's another Scholastic product, Storia.
Oh.
Many schools are using Storia. Storia has the same ability also, where it lights up the words as you read along. Same with Scholastic News. They get the newspaper magazine, but if they were to go online and look at it online and listen to it the articles being read, the words light up as they go too. Those are all text-to-speech tools. And they're all great ones because I think back to
Electric Company, Between the Lines.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So I'm aging myself. Then Electric Company did the same thing on Channel 2 that I watched many, many times. And
Reading Rainbow did the same things too.
Okay, see, now that's our age difference there, but it's all good, definitely. Text-to-speech and going on from that, speech to text, or voice dictation, as some people refer to it. Many teachers noticed that students without learning disabilities were learning more effectively using text-to-speech, speech-to-text. They read longer, they write longer, and they show a great improvement in spelling.
Yeah, well, part of the great improvement in spelling is that the words are spelled right when they say the words. And so, I mean, let's just be real here. It's not like Google is going to misspell a word because you pronounced it correctly.
But when you think about it, they say a word, they may have in their mind what they would write down to spell that word. Mm-hmm. But if they speak it, laugh, right? How would a second grader spell laugh or a first grader spell laugh? You sound it out. You think that's going to be L-A-F, right? Well, that'd be Leif with the,
I know. You're saying how would a second grader spell it? I just said it. L-A-F-E.
In any case, they can see when they say the word laugh that it's L-A-U-G-H. So then that gets that whole thought process going, wow, I didn't think that's how that word was spelled. Right. And then when they see that word again in a book that they're reading, they'll make that connection.
Right. So it's a tool that will help them in their reading and moving along.
And again, I know you have a thought, but I just want to finish my thought on this particular voice dictation. What came to my mind was, and again, this goes back to what I think some teachers may have in the back of their mind, that they have to teach a certain way. I'll never forget when I was doing my student teaching, second grade classroom in a different district, not Springfield, and this student had an incredibly difficult time writing. He had very poor fine motor skills and just struggled to write anything, and yet the teacher wanted him to write, if not a multiple page document, definitely a one page piece. And I looked at her and I said, well, can't he type it? Does he have to write it? Can he type it? And she would not let him type it. She felt like she had to teach this child to write with a pencil. And that went against what I thought was the objective of that assignment.
Right.
So
So I was going to say, my first job out of college was a substitute para for the year at a school in Vermont, because that's where I went to school. And the person I worked with, I was one-on-one. So I followed a student around all day because that student, again, with the motor skills, was having a hard time with writing. And so when it came to the longer assignments, it was either me dictating what she said, or using a program like DragonSpeak that the school purchased, that purchased a license for her, so that any computer that she worked on, the program would pop up, and she would be able to, as we're talking now, talk to the computer, and the computer would write it, because her comprehension skills were all there. Like, you could read, she was a 5th or 6th grader, I'm trying to think back now, 10 years, but you could read a much more difficult book to her. She would be able to explain everything that's going on in the story. Her comprehension would be good. And like we were talking about with the game-based learning for just 20 minutes ago, she would be able to tell you everything that's going on with a character and be able to say a character would do this instead or this, and she would have all those skills. She could definitely do it, could not write. And so a program while I still worked with that student and trying to work on those skills to get her to write, she also wasn't going to fall behind, because the school was wise enough to say, you know what? Everything else is there except for this one part. So we're going to continue to work on this one part, but we don't want her to fall behind, because that one part is the be-all, end-all. Mm-hmm. And so they got her this program, and she continued her way all the way through, and she's definitely a graduate now. So that's
awesome. That's what I love to hear.
Yeah. I mean, that's where something like this comes in. And this was 10 years ago, so this was before Suri's time.
Right.
So
yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's finding out whatever it takes to help every student learn to the best of their ability.
I also think about with my phone and sending text messages. I don't like typing, and I also don't like the text typing. So using the letter U for the word U drives me bonkers, and I don't do it. So there's a little button on my phone which I can talk into, and everything I say goes into the text area to send a text. So I've sent at times 4 or 5 page texts. It tells you in the corner, when you hit that word count, where I've just sat there and I talked into the phone and then sent the text message, and it typed it all up for me. So, and I bet a lot of people out there actually use that particular feature on their phone.
That's true. I bet they do.
And that's essentially the same thing.
Right.
So,
yep, that's true. Everybody needs to just start thinking in new and different ways and apply that to the classroom. Something else, when you mentioned your phone, I use my phone a lot to read a variety of articles. Mm-hmm. So I do read. I may not read novels, but I do read a lot. But one thing that does aggravate me is all the clutter that you'll mm-hmm. see on a web page, whether it's ads or just other information. I want to wipe it all away and just read the article. And so there's something for a reader view that reduces the visual clutter on web pages. It helps students avoid sensory overload. And we know that has got to be a good thing to help students reduce that sensory overload. So the reader pulls out ads, buttons, and navigation bars to reduce all distractions.
Yeah, there's, the Safari Reader is the one that's most well known. Again, with this article focusing mostly on Apple. If you go and you read it, most of the things are Apple, and then it's a sentence saying, there's also this for Chrome.
They include the Google Chrome options.
They include a link for it. They don't go into detail like they do the other one.
Obviously, Mike does not like Apple, but both are choices.
Well, I think about, they are both choices, but I think about if we're thinking technology in the district, we are primarily a Windows-based district.
No, I agree. But the key to this article was to make people aware of these technology tools.
So, it was good to read about the Mercury Reader, which is an add-on to Chrome, which maybe is something that, as a classroom teacher, you investigate and try to figure out how you can get that onto all your student computers, because it would be a great tool, because they're already supposed to be using Chrome. And so if it's just an add-on to the Chrome, maybe there's a way that we can send it out from the district point of view. The next one they talk about is clock apps, which I don't know about you, but I use the clock on my phone all the time. And that's kind of like what they're talking about here. To time things, I set it. So my 4-year-old likes to time things. He's very much into, how much time do I have? How much time do I have? How much time do I have? He has yet to actually learn how to read the time on a clock, which is okay because he's 4. So we'll use on one of our phones or one of our older phones, we'll use the clock option on there. And we'll put the timer on. And the timer will count down and he can watch it count down. And there's been times where he's had his quiet room time where he's supposed to just sit and read or play quietly with toys, where he spends half the time staring at the clock. Just watching it count down. And whatever floats your boat.
That's all right. He's practicing his math skills by doing
practicing his timing skills. But it's what I like about it is that it's big. It's easy to read. Mine goes back and forth between digital and analog. So many clocks now are analog. I know what drove me crazy as a 5th grade teacher is Mr., because of course they don't say your name. Mr., what time is it? And I point up at the clock I don't know how to read that. And in my head, I'm like, you're in 5th grade. You need to know how to read this. And I'm like, or they say, can I see your watch? And at the time, my watch was a faceless watch. So it just had where the 12 o'clock was and then no other numbers. And I'm like, sure. It's like, Mr., I can't read that. I'm like, I know, because if you can't read the one with the numbers, you can't read the one without the numbers.
Right. Telling time is definitely a struggle for so many students. I did do my best with my 2nd grade class way back when to teach them how to tell time. But even if they can tell time on the analog clock, still the perception of how long is 10 minutes, how long is half an hour, how long is 3 minutes is very hard for students to understand. So the clock app, I think, is a nice way to get them to understand what it feels like when the teacher says, okay, in 5 minutes, we're going to. Right. Then they can watch that time tick away.
Because I remember being like, all right, we're gonna sit here for a minute, because we were doing lessons on time, and so we were focusing on what does a minute feel like. So I'm like, all right, we're gonna sit in silence for a minute.
Oh, I did that too.
And they're like, okay, and then they start talking again. And it's like, no, that's not a minute.
Right.
And so we sat there, we watched the clock. We tried it with the clock on the wall, but that wasn't able to keep their attention because they couldn't read it anyways. So I put a stopwatch on the smartboard. So it was giant. It was literally the size of a whiteboard were the numbers. I put it in the Google one that they talked about in here. You can make different sizes. And so I made it the size of my screen. And they were watching and they're like, and then once that minute was up, they're like, Mister, that was a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I know, and that's the kind of time that, what if we had that amount of time to think before we try to answer a question? Well, we'd be here all day, mister. And so, but they were getting the idea of, how long time really is. When we say time flies by, it's because we look at our watch, it says noon, and the next time we look at our watch, it says 4, and we're like, what just happened? Mm-hmm. So,
or we look at the time between our first podcast and this, our last podcast of the season, and time flew.
Yeah, it's been a great way to judge how many more weeks we have left in school, because the season is the length of the school year.
That's right. Well, hopefully these little tips will help some of our listeners out there. And if you have any questions or have other tools that you'd like to make us aware of, then let us know.
So this week is our season finale. And for our season finale, we have to go big or go home. And so that's why our interview this week is with Paul Foster, CIO. And CIO stands for
Chief Information Officer.
So he is the person who's in charge of our entire department. We spend the next little bit of this podcast talking with him all about technology in the district, from where it was when he started to where we're going in the future. So go ahead, take a listen. Hope you enjoy it.
Well, my name is Paul Foster, and I am the Chief Information Officer, and I have been with the Springfield Public Schools for about 7 years, and I was with the City of Springfield for 3 years before that.
What made you jump from the city to the school district?
It's a great question. With the city, my background was in data and analysis and analytics. And in the city, I was providing performance management and data analytics work for all of the city departments, so police department, fire department, public works, as well as the schools. But in many respects, my heart has always been interested in education. It goes way back for me. And as a result of that, when the opportunity came to really focus my work on the schools, it just was a great opportunity to take.
Can you describe for our listeners the 3 different separate teams that you are the head of?
Sure. Yeah, so my department is called the Office of Information Technology and Accountability, which is a very long name for a department. But really, there are 3 teams within the department. And one is what we call technology operations. And the easiest way to think about that is it's hardware. So it's the computers, it's the cords, it's the cables that run in the walls of all of our buildings to make sure that our computers can connect to the internet. And it's making sure all of that stuff's working. If a student's computer's not working, a staff member's computer's not working, we have staff who are going out to the computer to fix it or send it off to a manufacturer to make repairs. But it's basically keeping the hardware working. We also have what we call our information management team. Which, as the title says, it's all about managing information. And there's 2 parts of that. There's what we call information systems, and those are folks who are basically making sure all the software in the district is running. So we use something called Power School, which is where teachers take attendance and input grades. So making sure Power School is up and running, and any other software product, making sure that, when we implement a new piece of software, student accounts are created, that kind of thing. Also within information management, we have a group we call strategic data. So that's the other side of information. All that software, teachers, administrators are putting information into these software applications all day, every day. The strategic data team has a job of figuring out what do we do with all that information and how do we make meaningful analysis with that. And so that's, as an example, that's a team that several years ago, we were noticing that in the 9th grade, we had too many students failing Algebra 1. And so that was a team that took a lot of this data that we compile about our students and did an analysis to understand, okay, what are the things that happen in middle school or even elementary school that suggest to us that a student's either going to be successful or not successful in Algebra 1 in the 9th grade, and then analyzing it, looking at the places where we could intervene earlier so that when those kids get to 9th grade, they're ready to pass Algebra 1. And then lastly, we have our digital learning and assessment team, which again is a powerful 4-person strong team whose job is to really support all of the work we're doing as a district around the use of technology in the context of instruction. And it's called digital learning and assessment because, as I had mentioned earlier, all of our assessments are moving online. And we feel like assessment is just part of instruction. It's not something separate. So assessment is just one phase of instruction where students learn new content. And then you assess to find out, okay, how well did they learn? How much did they learn? Is there stuff that needs to be taught again? And so that's deliberately one team that's able to support schools in thinking about both the instructional side of using technology in the classroom as well as the assessment side of using technology in the classroom.
You're coming from the world of data, and now you've been in this role for 7 years. Talk a little bit about what the data warehouse was doing when you first arrived, and any changes that have happened over the years, and what it looks like now.
Sure. So we have a data warehouse. It's in a software product called Cognos, which is made by IBM. That's something we've had it longer than I've been here, as you indicated. So we've had it for I want to say between 8 and 10 years. The district's had Cognos. And just, for those not familiar, I mean, a data warehouse really is, in some ways, that's a pretty descriptive name. I mean, we put a whole bunch of data in there like a warehouse. And then the key piece is what do you do with it once it's in there? And so we build reports, so people can access that data in ways that are meaningful for them. But when I first started 7 years ago, the data warehouse was available and it was in use, but we had actually we got the data warehouse from the state. The state had paid for it, and the state has their own version of the data warehouse. And so when I first started, the data warehouse mostly, we just copied over reports that the state had created, so reports on things like state assessment data. And so we had duplicate copies of those reports so we could run them locally. But we hadn't done a lot of kind of further development of the data warehouse beyond what we had gotten kind of from the state. And so we took a lot of time and certainly some money to really build over the last 7 years what's available in that warehouse. And to be honest, we have more work to do, both in the building, but also in the training. I know I've talked a lot about time being a limiting factor. And our data warehouse is not used as much as I'd like it to be used. It's certainly used a lot, but I think it could be used more if we had more time to really walk people through the different reports, the different features. But we have really expanded its use. We've put a lot more data in. So I think our philosophy as a district and as an IT department is we will always have lots of different software applications that people have to use in their daily work. Things like PowerSchool for attendance and grades. We have a product called Easy IEP, which is where information is recorded for students with disabilities. And so we'll always have a lot of products like that people have to use, a lot of software that people have to use to just go about their daily business. But our goal has always been that all of the data generated by all of those different pieces of software would ultimately land in the data warehouse. And the idea, is simple, that you have one-stop shopping for data. So you may have to use all these different applications to conduct business, but there's one place you can go to find out kind of everything you need to know, whether it's about a school or about a student or about a group of students. And again, we're always building. We have more to do. So some examples of some of the things we built over the last few years. We built early on an administrator's dashboard, and the idea is like a dashboard on your car. We wanted administrators to have a quick read on how their school was doing. And so it includes things like attendance data, discipline data, grade data, so they can quickly see, okay, what's happening. And one of the things that we've done in our data warehouse too is we've built a lot of what we call drill throughs, but it's just an opportunity, you see one number and you want to know, well, what's behind that number? In many of our reports, you can click on the number and it's going to give you more detail. So a good example, we're trying to do a lot to address the issue of chronic absenteeism in the Springfield schools. So on the administrator's dashboard, a principal can see the percent of their students who are chronically absent. But if they click on that percentage, they then see a list of who those students are. Because just knowing that a certain percentage of students are chronically absent, you can't really act on that. But clicking and then knowing, okay, these are the students who are chronically absent, then you can take steps like calling home or maybe visiting the home to figure out, is there something going on in that student or family's life that the school can be supportive with that's going to help that student get to school. So things like that, the administrator's dashboard, we put all of our assessment data in there so that folks can see kind of students' test histories, their trajectories. Another report we have that I think is one of the more popular ones is what we call our student profile. And it's basically, the intent is that it's, every piece of data we have on a particular student on one screen. And the idea is if you're a teacher of that student, you can log in and, you need to know what's the student's history or how are they doing. You can click in and see that. And so, again, much more to do. We always want to expand that. But we've certainly come a long way over the last few years in putting a lot more reports out there that I think are user-friendly. I guess the other last example I'll mention is one of the nice features of the product we use is the ability to email reports. And so, for example, principals every morning get an attendance report that just gives them the attendance from the day before. They also get reports that every day that highlight students who have been hit certain thresholds of absenteeism so they can take follow-up actions as necessary. So automating that, really the point is to make it easier for the staff in schools to have the information at their fingertips they need to do their daily job.
As the 2016-17 school year comes to a close, what are some of the highlights?
Well, it's been a really good year. It's been a good year for our department. I think it's been a good year for the district as a whole. But within our department, some of the exciting things that have happened. We've had our first schools starting to send home laptops with their students. So we had 3 elementary schools that have sent laptops home with students as young as 3rd grade. And students have been loving it. Teachers have valued it and seen the value of being able to send the technology home with students. So that's one thing. Just generally, the district's move towards digital learning has really advanced this year. This is the first year we were truly 1-to-1 in grades 3 to 12. And with that 1-to-1, just walking around and going into classrooms and seeing the kinds of things that teachers are doing and the kinds of things that teachers are asking students to do with the technology. Seeing students coding or creating their own projects, creating their own movies and creating their own videos and seeing students engaged. I love walking into a classroom and seeing every student doing something and, asking them what they're doing and having them tell you in an excitedly what it is they're working on.
Did you have that vision when you first took on this job? You were coming from a data position. Did you envision a one-to-one initiative at that point?
I don't think so. I think it's a good question. It's been 7 years. So ironically, when I first came in as the chief information officer, it was my first job in IT. And so the superintendent trusted me with kind of trying to learn it. And I have a very good team that brought me along and helped me learn the ropes. But I think early on, within the first couple of years, one of the things that was really clear is that we were a school district where technology was optional. It was optional for teachers. It was optional for students. And it was seen as either an add-on or almost an elective. And you saw that even in schools where some schools taught technology, some schools didn't. You saw, some high schools offered more advanced kind of programming courses, some didn't. But really, it was something that, if a teacher was interested in using technology, you'd see really cool, interesting things happening in the classroom. If students were interested, they might try something, or, if they had a computer at home, they might type their paper instead of handwriting it. But it was very optional. And so early on, within the first couple of years of being with Springfield's public schools, it just became clear that, the rest of the world had moved beyond technology as optional. Technology wasn't optional really in any other kind of industry or line of work. It was just part and parcel with how work was done and how people were productive. And it just felt important to bring that in. So it took time. It took a couple of years for that notion that technology needed to be integral to what we were doing in classrooms every day. It took time for that to evolve into a 1-to-1 program in 3 to 12 with students taking laptops home. But it started with that idea that technology couldn't be an optional thing, and for our students to be ready for the kind of jobs they're going to have to work in when they leave us, that they're going to have to use technology in school.
With moving to the 1-to-1 initiative, what has been one of the bigger challenges other than, of course, money?
Yeah. It's a great question. To be honest, I think just fear of change. It could have been 1-to-1. It could have been something else. But I think that there's just a reality that schooling is something that it's always changing, but there's also a way that there's these common threads of how we do school that have just been true for a really long time, right? So the idea that, the student is sort of to some degree, is the one who's kind of receiving information, is in a more passive posture. And the teacher is the person in a more active posture, sort of, conveying information or just leading the classroom, if you will. And I think with 1-to-1, it really calls for a different model of instruction. It's kind of disruptive, and I think certainly can cause some anxiety for folks, but because there's a release of control, right? If you're standing in front of 24 10-year-olds and they've all got a laptop in front of them, unless you're saying something super compelling, they're probably not listening. And so there's just a way that you have to do something different to engage them, to hold their attention, to keep them on task. You have to let them have more control over what they're doing. So I think anxiety, I think fear, not in a negative way. Like I don't, as I've talked to teachers around the district, when we say we're doing this, that we're going 1-to-1, that we're going to do digital learning, I don't feel like I've ever heard a teacher say that's a terrible idea. I think people get it. I think people understand it. Staff, teachers understand that, the kind of jobs, the kind of work that's going to be expected of our students when they leave us necessitates this. It necessitates them using technology in the classroom. Just doesn't mean it's not hard. Doesn't mean it's not hard for those teachers to figure out how to do that, how to manage the classroom differently, how to embrace their role differently. There's a superintendent I have a lot of respect for who's in a district who's done a one-to-one initiative, not whole district, but they're moving that direction, who he likes to say when he walks in the classroom what he wants to see, and I'm sure other people have said this as well, but he wants to see students working harder than the teacher. And I think for a lot of years when you walked into a classroom, kind of in the American model of education, the teacher's doing all the work. And I think moving to a mode where the teacher is supporting, facilitating, guiding, but it's the students who are doing the hard work, I think will be tremendously beneficial for our kids.
With trying to quell fears and help teachers along to be able to do those kind of projects that you were just talking about, what are some of the things that the OITA department has done?
It's a great question. And we've done a lot, but we also do it with a small team. So we have really around digital learning, we have 4 people who are out there in the field on a daily basis supporting 58 schools. So we've tried to be creative about what that can look like. A lot of, virtual resources and training. So whether that be pointing folks to videos, making new videos, maybe a podcast. But also we've tried to be creative with things like we've had for 3 or 4 years now, a Saturday ed tech conference where teachers come unpaid on a Saturday morning to hear from each other and learn from each other about what their colleagues are doing in their classrooms with technology. And again, not just with the focus being technology, right? What they're doing with technology to really make the instruction and the lessons they're teaching really compelling for students. So the conferences, the virtual trainings, we've done some in person. We've brought in some outside trainers to train teachers on our learning management system, which is a piece of software we use called Brightspace. We've brought in trainers to provide some training to small cohorts of teachers around what does a digital learning shift look like in a school. One of the things I hear all of the time from teachers is, when are you going to teach us more? When are you going to teach us more about that learning management system? We also use Microsoft Office 365, and I hear all the time, when are you going to teach us more about Office 365? And it is certainly one of the dominant challenges for this initiative is time, is when can we fit in the kind of training and support. And the other thing I'll say is there's the training, whether it be virtual or in person, but really what our teachers need even more is somebody sitting alongside them in their class and having that embedded coaching. And that's something we're still trying to figure out. So
you mentioned Brightspace a while back. What was that process like of choosing a learning management system?
It's a great question. Well, let me say the intent, right? So the intent of adopting a learning management system was, as we were going one-to-one, as we were pushing technology into classrooms with a focus on instruction, we felt like we needed a tool to, a kind of a centralizing tool to support that. The way I think of a learning management system, and folks have used many different kinds. Many folks in college had experience with something like Blackboard. But the way I think of it is that we have physical classrooms all over our district where students gather with their teacher and then they engage and with content. And that's how students learn, is that interaction with each other and with their teacher in the classroom. Really, what a learning management system is for us is the online version of that. It's an online space where our students gather with each other and with their teacher to learn, to engage with content. And so we knew we needed that. We couldn't just throw laptops into classrooms without providing some kind of really a backbone where a lot of that interaction, the online interaction between students and teachers and between students and students could happen. So that was the genesis, was we knew we needed one. And there, as you suggested, there are a lot of products out there. And so the way we did it is we did a request for proposals. So we were aware of some of the products out there, but essentially we had to, and this was hard. I mean, this took time. We had to sit down and think about what's everything we would want this product to do, and literally make a list and say, these are the different features we would want. These are the different, both features that students and teachers would use, but also the features that we need for my department to make the thing run, to make it work on our computers and on our network. And so, we put together that whole proposal, we sent it out, and I want to say we got 7 or 8 different vendors who make learning management solutions to submit proposals. And so it's really, some of this has to do with, state procurement laws, but the way it worked is they submit a proposal saying this is how they could do, this is how their product does all the things we want it to do. And we basically had a team of, I want to say, 8 or 10 people who had to sit and read all of those, which was not necessarily fun. But it was interesting, at least, right, to see that, most of the products did most of what we were looking for, but they all took somewhat different approaches to it. Interestingly, one of the products we were most excited and interested in didn't submit a proposal. So that was one of the things that was, it's sort of an interesting kind of wrinkle in the process. But we basically sat and reviewed those proposals, and then we ranked them, and we decided, our first choice, second choice, third choice. And then after we went through all of that, then we actually got to see the price. And actually, in good news for Springfield taxpayers, what actually ended up happening is the product that was our first choice product based on what they had said they could accomplish for us was also the lowest cost, which doesn't always work that way. So that was beneficial for us.
In all things education related, there are changes frequently over time, which some people adjust to very easily, others do not. What would your response be to people out there who may not totally love Brightspace and are waiting for the day that it gets replaced with something else?
I hear that question often. Is Brightspace here to stay? I think one of the things we experience in a school district like Springfield, we're a large, diverse district with, frankly, a lot of challenges, and we're really working hard to meet the needs of our student population. But one of the things that means is we're constantly rolling out new initiatives, partly because there's always a new challenge or a new regulation, a new challenge we're trying to tackle or a new regulation we have to implement. And so I think for teachers, that gets exhausting to just, and I think there is that, natural instinct to say, oh, this is just the next new thing. I can wait it out. And so I have gotten the question from some teachers about, well, are we going to keep using Brightspace? Because I don't want to invest the time to learn how to use this product. So the short answer for now is, yeah, our plan is to use Brightspace for the foreseeable future. And we've just entered a new contract with them. But I do have an answer for those teachers also who really don't like it. One of the things we've tried to say, I mentioned early on in this conversation that we want students to have choice in the classroom, choice of how they demonstrate their learning. So an example of that for students, back when I was in school, if a teacher gave an assignment, everybody produced the same product. So it would be, you need to write a paper on this topic. We want to get to the point where what we're saying to students is, look, here's the topic. And, we give them, some rubric or some guide that tells them what they need to show in their product. But if they want to make a movie or a podcast or a blog or a poster or write a paper, they have the choice to do that. So I can't say that we want that for students if I'm not willing to allow that for teachers as well. And so while Brightspace is absolutely the product that we're intending to use for the foreseeable future as our online classroom, there certainly will be teachers in the district who want to use something else. And we're not telling them they can't. We certainly would encourage all of our teachers to really try and begin using Brightspace. But the reality is, if somebody's more comfortable with another tool, we're okay with that, as long as they also know that, with limited staffing, we're able to support as Brightspace. And so if they're using something else, that's something they need to know enough about how it works that they don't, they're not reaching out for help because it's not something we have capacity to support. So that said, Brightspace is here to stay, and it will be our online classroom and will be in use for a lot of district purposes. We already have a lot of schools using it for their teacher planning times and teacher professional learning communities. And I think we want to see that kind of use grow. And, I do struggle with this question of, I want to give teachers some choice, certainly from a student perspective. If all of our teachers were using Brightspace, it's a better experience for our students because they're able to go to one place for every class. Whereas if each teacher chooses to use a different tool, I think that's a little more challenging for students. But our students are pretty flexible too.
In trainings that I have done recently, one of the comments I hear is, I'm not ready to trade in my laptop for a new one yet because of XYZ, their comfort, software. They have the same laptop at home so they don't have to move their plugs around. What are some things that you can say to help encourage those teachers to upgrade?
Sure. Well, one is just the sad reality that computers don't last forever. And so there is just a reality that they're going to have to upgrade because at some point their computer is going to stop working. And, my department's not going to be able to support it because we can't get parts for it, or it's, it's just too old to support. So there's that sort of the realist part of that. But, the more hopeful answer to the question, I guess, is that, as you said, the newer machine with Windows 10, the newer laptop with Windows 10, works very well with all of the stuff we've rolled out. So we haven't talked a lot about Office 365, but, we're moving to all students and staff to using what's called OneDrive to store all their files. And with the advent of OneDrive, one of the things that's very nice with Windows 10 is it just works seamlessly. So OneDrive is, it's saving your files off in the cloud, which just means it's, saving on some server farm owned by Microsoft, somewhere else in the country or the world, which, sounds bad, but it's, actually much more secure in some ways and also backed up in ways that are very helpful. With Windows 10, it's much easier to save your files to OneDrive because it looks like you're just saving your files to a hard drive on your local computer. It's almost transparent, the fact that it's being saved to your OneDrive. And you just don't get that experience with our older laptops that are still running Windows 7 or Windows 8.1. And I will also say for teachers, it'll get more challenging. All of our student machines are going to Windows 10 over the summer. And so it'll become more challenging if for teachers continuing to stick with the older laptops because they'll be using an operating system that none of their students are using. And so they're going to have to see and experience something totally different than their students, which I would think would be challenging, in trying to bring that technology into the classroom.
Now, I know currently there are multiple ways that teachers can submit help tickets based on the problems they may be facing in the classroom. What are the plans for the future?
Great question. We would like to get to a consolidated system. So interestingly, when I first started in this job, there was one help desk system that was in use in the district. So if somebody needed help with software or hardware or their password wasn't working, for example, there was one system they'd go to. They'd create a help desk ticket. One of the challenges we always had with that is when that individual was creating the ticket, this system had categories and they had to self-identify and say, I think my problem is my computer, or I think my problem is my email account. Well, in many cases, our end users didn't know what the problem was. And so over time, we shifted in some areas so that digital learning, if somebody needed help with digital learning, with infusing technology in their classroom, they would send an email to one email account. If somebody was having a problem with a piece of software, they would send an email to another email account. If they were having a problem with a computer, they would still go back into that help desk system and create a ticket. So in some ways, we went from frying pan to fire. So we had the one system, which wasn't working great for us because, again, our end users didn't really know where to categorize their tickets. And so they were often getting to the wrong person who wasn't really the person who could help them. But we're sort of still in that position now. So even though that now instead of one ticketing system, there's multiple avenues through which people can ask for help, they're still not sure which avenue is the right one. And so we end up having lots of, I think it's very frustrating for teachers sometimes to put in a help desk ticket and then have somebody close the ticket and say, no, you need to send an email to this other email account. And people feel like they're getting the runaround. So I think within the next year, we hope to go back to some kind of online ticketing system that is used by all departments within my office, certainly, but also other departments like HR potentially, or the business office or payroll, where people often have questions as well. And once we go to that, I think we'll develop it hopefully in a way where it's much more clear to an end user, how to file the ticket and how to get it to the right person.
Can you talk a little bit about any collaboration that's done between Springfield Public Schools and any of the area colleges?
Sure. We have one in particular going on right now that is pretty exciting. We are working with the University of Massachusetts at Amherst on what we're calling our Computer Science for All planning. And, just to explain that a little bit, we're part of what's really a national movement to make sure that students at all grade levels, that essentially all students, meaning 100% of students, are getting experience with computer science and computational thinking over the course of their schooling career. And we were fortunate enough to be able to partner with the University of Massachusetts, who has some really exceptional faculty. And they had gone in to get a grant from the National Science Foundation. And this National Science Foundation grant is paying for a couple of things. It's paying for the district in collaboration with UMass to develop a plan for what it's going to look like to integrate computer science and computational thinking instruction across the district in grades K to 12. And then simultaneous with that plan development, there's several professors from the university who are doing research in the district to help inform that plan. So an example of that research is there's a professor who's done what's called a social network analysis of some of our schools. And the point of that social network analysis is to identify who is it that teachers go to when they want help with their instruction. Because certainly, we have instructional coaches in all our buildings, and some of our teachers would certainly go to an instructional coach if they have a question about, a particular, issue they're having with their teaching practice. But other teachers may not go to the coach. They may go to their friend down the hall. And so the social network analysis is giving us information about, okay, who do our teachers look to? Because as we think about implementing, when I say implementing computer science for all, we want to fold it into other content areas. And we don't want to just have a computer science teacher off in their own separate classroom teaching computer science. We want kids to be learning computer science and computational thinking skills and principles in the context of English, math, science, social studies. But for that to be successful, those teachers who teach English, math, science, social studies need to be comfortable with the idea of computer science and computational thinking. And so we're using that social network analysis to get an understanding of who do teachers go to, because we want to make sure we're training those teachers that teachers go to in the computer science, the computational thinking, the digital literacy, so that those teachers, will then be able to share that with the folks who come to them for help. So, it's been, a good partnership, and there's more to come. We've actually applied for another National Science Foundation grant along with the University of Massachusetts to move to the implementation phase and actually begin piloting, where we're integrating computer science and computational thinking instruction right into, second grade ELA block or, sixth grade math class. And so we're excited for that work. And I think the last thing I'll say on that, I guess, is that, it's incredibly important work, because if you look at computer science field is obviously growing tremendously, both nationally and internationally, and the number of jobs in the future that even if they're not programming or defined as a computer science job, but the number of jobs in the future that are going to require some level of either computer science or computational thinking proficiency. I've heard numbers as high as 50% of jobs in the future, and we don't want our students to be left behind. And as it stands now, the reality is that the computer science and the sort of technology field is dominated by white men. And if that's going to change, it's only going to change if districts like Springfield, which have a very diverse population of students, if we need to be the ones who are leading the charge to introduce computer science and computational thinking to all students, if we're going to make sure that, students of color and women are reflected in the technology field in the future.
What feedback have you heard from your daughter?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I have 3 kids in the schools, and my oldest, who is 16 and in the 10th grade, gives me lots of feedback. Sometimes it's, she'll tell me there's stuff they're doing on the computer she doesn't feel like doing, like, she'd rather handwrite the essay. Mm-hmm. Although she does appreciate the fact that, when she has to make edits, she doesn't have to rewrite the whole thing. I think one of the things we've done a lot of is moving our assessments online. And I've gotten some feedback from her that, she wishes maybe she was still doing some of those assessments on paper. There's something that's, I think, comfortable and familiar about taking a test on paper. But at the same time, I've also gotten really good feedback from her that, that she likes the autonomy. She likes having some choice. And our schools are still moving that direction. So she doesn't have that in every class. And I think she notices the difference where there's a classroom where they're doing say a more interesting or engaging project versus a class where maybe that she's still sort of more in a passive kind of receiving information mode. She did a project last year. It might have been actually early this year. She was taking Algebra 2 for math, and they were using this online graphing calculator. And it's not that you can't, graphing calculators could do this as well. But she just really got into this project because she's very into art. And so she was basically creating this picture by putting in all these equations into this online graphing calculator. I think that might have been one of the favorite things she got to do this year, just because she was, she went sort of above and beyond the assignment because she wanted to make this really great picture. And so she had this list of, 30 or 40 different equations plotted on this graph to make this, cool picture. And her most exciting moment actually in that project was when she had asked her teacher how she could make a particular shape in the graph because she needed it for a picture. And her teacher didn't know the answer. And she went out and figured it out, put the equation in, and she had the picture she wanted, and then showed her teacher. And I think that's just, that's my daughter, but I think for all of our kids in Springfield, seeing kind of the excitement of being able to teach their teacher something. I think it's hard for us adults sometimes to be in the posture of a learner and let kids, who are 20 or 30 years younger than us teach us something, but it's so powerful for kids.
I know you visited many other districts throughout the country. How do you feel Springfield compares to other districts now? Well,
that's a good question. So when I go to other parts of the country, I go to conferences, I always think, I want to do that. I want to do that. There's always more that we can do. But if I'm honest and sit back and reflect, I think we've come a long way. So certainly within Massachusetts, I'm not aware of any other urban school districts that are doing you kind of integrating technology as comprehensively. What you tend to find in other places, certainly in New England, are individual schools that might have a one-to-one program where students are taking device home, or might have some other, it doesn't have to be one-to-one, might have another digital learning initiative. But I think one of the things that's unique about Springfield, certainly in New England, is the fact that our superintendent and our school committee felt like it was a priority, that this was something that happening in every school and wasn't just for a certain set of students. But there certainly are things happening around the country that are very impressive in districts both larger and smaller than ours, and things we'd love to, emulate and move to.
With thinking about next year and the next couple of years, what are some of the exciting things that are coming out of the department as a whole?
It's a great question. There's a lot that's underway. Some of the things we've already talked about. I think we're going to see more and better stuff out of Brightspace. I think we're going to be rolling out more features. So Brightspace, we've always had an e-portfolio, which is just a really cool opportunity for students to preserve their work over time in the Springfield schools. A student could, save their exemplary pieces of work from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade. So there's something like an e-portfolio in Brightspace, which just, allows a student to save their work, allows a teacher to see what a student did in the prior year, to just get a baseline, and it's almost like a way to get a quick assessment of where a student's at coming in, is looking at their work from the prior year. So things like Brightspace, we'll see new things coming, like the e-portfolio. I mentioned Office 365. We'll see more. There are a lot of tools that we really haven't fully explored in my department, much less rolled out to and trained teachers on. And again, time for training is very limited, but whether it be through videos or webinars, we want to make sure we're rolling out some of those tools. Some of the other things we're trying to do more and more to support schools, to support their own devices. One of the things that's, I think, is remarkable about, and I don't think this is not something to do with me. I think I have an exceptional team. And one of the things that's remarkable is that we've actually gone from having about 10,000 devices that our department supports when I started here to about 30,000. And our staffing stayed about the same, which sometimes that causes some grumbling within the department. But the reality is that's because of some of the excellent work that members of the team have done to make that possible. And so we're going to see some more of that kind of work, allowing schools to support themselves. Examples of that are, empowering students to provide some help desk services at the building level, letting students be the ones who help a teacher when a teacher is struggling with a computer. Another example is when a computer is not working well, we do what's called reimage, which just means we basically erase it and reinstall all the software so it goes back to the way it was when somebody first got the computer. We want to empower schools to be able to do that on their own, so that if a student computer, a staff computer's just not, it's running slow, it's just not working well, rather than having to put in a help desk ticket and wait for somebody from my team to come and resolve that issue, the school can handle that at the building level. But the things I think that are most exciting, though, I should say, are really on the instructional front. This move to We Learn, to our digital learning initiative, has been one that's been in partnership between our digital learning team and the district's Office of Instruction. And we're really, I'm excited about what's going to happen with instruction over the next couple of years. This August in professional development, every teacher in the district is going to not only think about how to infuse technology in a single student task, which is what we did last year. We're going to think about how do you infuse technology in a series of tasks that allow students to produce some kind of product that is unique to them, that they've created. And having all, 25 or 2,600 teachers in Springfield start the school year thinking about what kind of products can they ask students to create that demonstrate students' mastery of what they're supposed to be learning. I'm just excited to see what our students create. I'm excited to see what our teachers come up with during August PD. And, the power of things like Take Home. I mentioned that we've piloted, I think we've had 3 elementary schools sending laptops home so far this school year, and we want to expand that next year. And there's a lot of evidence that students need more time on learning than they're going to get in the 6 or 6.5 hours they're with us during a school day. And I think the power of sending them home with a laptop where they can continue doing the work they were doing at school, but also where teachers can assign different kinds of homework. They can, forever teachers have sent students home with projects that they're supposed to work on in collaboration with other students. That's not always easy in a district where some kids are riding a bus a half an hour. They might not live anywhere near the classmate that they're supposed to do a project with. But with some of these online tools and with the students taking our laptops home, their ability to collaborate after hours on projects, I'm excited to see kind of what takes shape with Take Home. And I also just, at a personal level, I feel generally just the idea that we're one-to-one, but also that we're going to allow students to take these laptops home, I think says something about how we feel about our students. It says something about the fact that both that we value them and think that they're worth that kind of investment, but also think that we trust them. And I think what we're finding in our small pilots of Take Home so far, we haven't had a single device lost, stolen, or damaged. And I think that is a testament to the fact that when we kind of trust our students to and make this investment in them and say that we trust them with this investment, I think they rise to that. They rise to that challenge. And I think when we talk about this whole digital learning push, I think both our teachers and our students, I'm excited to see the ways they rise to that challenge. And teachers giving up some of that control, letting students have more choice in how they learn, and then students rising to the challenge of using this technology to go further. I'd love to, steal from Microsoft. Microsoft has a vision statement that their vision, this is a very big statement, but Microsoft's vision statement is to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. And I think, if I was going to, steal shamelessly from Microsoft, I'd say the mission of our We Learn initiative in Springfield is for every student and teacher in Springfield to achieve more and to use technology to be part of that achievement.
Interview, Suzanne. I know we got to spend a lot of time in here with Paul discussing all the questions we could think of.
Right, and actually I had more, but I knew it was getting pretty long, so I'll hold the rest of my questions till our next interview.
What was great about it is we got to really hear the genesis of technology in this district for the past number of years and how we got to where we are with We Learn and things that are coming up for next year. And I think the collaboration that we're starting to do between departments is really going to help the district grow and grow and grow and become stronger.
Definitely. And I also think it's nice to hear a voice of someone that you usually just see the name Paul Foster, Chief Information Officer, and you don't really get a feel for who he is as a person and what he envisions for our district. So to hear all those ideas coming straight from him, it was very inspiring to me.
So we hope it was for you too. With this being our last podcast of the year, we're not going to give you any questions. We haven't gotten any new feedback. Please go on iTunes, review us, rate us. We would like to hear so that when we start season 2 at the beginning of next year, you'll hear the first podcast during PD week, and it will be super exciting, awesome, and new. And we thank you for giving us your time for season 1 and this incredible journey that we have started together and that we're going to continue on again in a few months. So signing off for the end of season 1, I'm Mike Thomas.
And I'm Suzanne Zargis.
We'll see you next year.